For the 5.5 years that the Monday Night Wars lasted, any given Monday could have been labelled a tale of two shows, for whatever subjective reason one comes up with. You could contrast a Nitro from their glory years to a Raw during its sputtering doldrums, or a brilliant 2000 Raw to a Nitro hampered by Russo at his worst. However, no singular Monday head-to-head during the Wars is more fitting of the Tale of Two Shows handle than that of January 4th, 1999. This was the night in which each show made history for very different reasons. One program delivered a feel-good moment for the ages, while the other was responsible for two of the most tone-deaf misfires in the entire history of professional wrestling. The tables turned in the Monday Night Wars in 1998. WCW Nitro had run up a streak of 22 months without losing a single head-to-head week in TV ratings to WWF Raw, until April 13th of the year in question. In the prior months, the WWF began closing the gap on dominant Nitro, as interest for Mike Tyson's involvement in Steve Austin and Shawn Michaels' world title feud made a few headlines, and piqued more than a little interest. Nitro still won the weekly battles into the spring, but post-WrestleMania, Raw started inching closer. After losing by a full ratings point or so in many of the prior weeks in 1998, the head-to-head battle the night after WrestleMania 14, where Austin had captured the gold, scored a 3.8 rating to Nitro's 4.2, the narrowest ratings gap since May of the previous year. The following week, a taped Raw scored a 4.4 to Nitro's 4.6. And finally, on April 13th, the dam burst. On the strength of Vince McMahon somewhat begrudgingly accepting a challenge from Austin to wrestle him for the title that night, an unheard of head-spinning development for the time, Raw beat Nitro 4.6 to 4.2, ending nearly 2 years of ratings futility. Nitro won the following week by a 0.7 margin, but it would be their last victory for a while. Beginning April 27th, Raw assembled an undefeated run that lasted until July 6th, when WCW had Goldberg defeat Hollywood Hogan for the world title in front of 40,000 fans in the Challenger's native Atlanta. Raw won the 4 weeks that followed, before Nitro won 3 head-to-head contests in August, powered through mainstream attention brought by talk show host Jay Leno, and the anticipated yet ultimately confounding debut of the Warrior. Following 2 weeks of preemptions due to tennis coverage on USA Network, Raw began rebuilding its momentum in the autumn, and the battles with Nitro were often close. On September 14th, Nitro won 4.5 to 4.0, owed to Ric Flair's emotional return to WCW. Raw edged Nitro the following week 4.0 to 3.9, while Nitro regained control on September 28th, winning 4.6 to 4.0. Raw began taking over again in October with some close victories, before Nitro won on October 26th, 5.1 to 4.6. This might sound impressive, but it was actually a source of embarrassment for WCW. The night before, at Halloween Havoc, the show ran long, and many customers saw their pay-per-view feeds cut just as the world title match between Goldberg and Diamond Dallas Page was kicking off. Irate viewers demanded refunds, while WCW compromised by airing the main event match in full on Nitro the next night. That 5.1 rating is in large part due to annoyed consumers finally getting the main event they'd paid for, as well as non-customers getting to see a pay-per-view world title match for free. The book The Death of WCW claims that an estimated $1.5 million was lost in pay-per-view revenue due to the error. Nitro won the ratings battle that night in a Pyrrhic victory, but if WCW could see the future, they would have celebrated it. Because it was their last victory. Indeed, Nitro would never defeat Raw again in the head-to-head, though nobody really would have guessed it at the time. The next few weeks of ratings matchups did indicate that Nitro was suddenly facing an uphill battle. Their product, outside of Goldberg and some interesting mid-carders, was growing cold, while the Austin McMahon drama and the pushing of fresher characters on Raw began bringing record viewership to that show. The gap began widening in the WWF's favor. On November 16th, the night after The Rock won his first world title in controversial fashion at Survivor Series, Raw pasted Nitro 5.5 to 4.3. Some weeks were closer than others, but Raw did enjoy a few instances of full-point ratings victories over Nitro in this period. Something had to change in WCW, and one unexpected change reared itself on Thanksgiving night, 1998. Appearing on Leno's Tonight Show that night, Hulk Hogan announced that he was retiring from professional wrestling. At 45 and with an unparalleled legacy as a star wrestler, the announcement didn't seem terribly shocking. What did raise a few eyebrows is that, in the same sit-down, Hogan also announced that he was running for president in the year 2000. After rival Jesse Ventura was elected governor of Minnesota earlier that month, Hogan clearly thought, "I've got to top that." So with Hogan out of the picture for good, or until he bombed out of the New Hampshire primary, or until he got bored or whatever, WCW had to focus on its other stars, which at this point consisted of New Hope Goldberg, the reigning world champion, and a bunch of assorted 40-somethings that had seen better days. Kevin Nash was only 39, which was basically college-aged by WCW standards of the time. He was also still quite popular in 1998 due to his leadership of the New World Order splinter group, NWO Wolfpack. Thus, Nash made a reasonable opponent to match up against the mighty unbeaten Goldberg in the world title match at that December's Starrcade in Washington, D.C. To build Nash for the match, the near 7-footer won the fourth and final 60-man World War III Battle Royal in November, then defeated the towering Wrath the next night on Nitro. Wrath had a months-long unbeaten streak of his own going, so Nash was being painted as something of a streak buster. And he certainly wasn't done busting streaks. That's because the decision was made to have Kevin Nash dethrone Goldberg to win the WCW title at Starrcade, vanquishing the 15-month purported 173-match win streak in the process. It's still somewhat debated who came up with the idea to have the streak end rather abruptly. Nash has been blamed due to his perceived creative power at the time. However, head shot caller Eric Bischoff not only doesn't believe that Nash put the idea out there, but claims Nash was hesitant about actually doing it. While Bischoff doesn't remember who suggested having Nash beat Goldberg, he decided to go with the idea, despite some protestations, namely from veteran booker Kevin Sullivan. Sullivan claimed that Bischoff was worried about people turning against Goldberg for winning too much, to which Sullivan noted how much money Goldberg was drawing as an undefeated superhero. Ultimately, Goldberg did go down in defeat, though it did take interference at different points from Bam Bam Bigelow, Disco Inferno, and a cattle prod wielding Scott Hall to do in Da Man. One Nash powerbomb later, and an ineradicable one followed the dash in Goldberg's career record. Reaction was mixed, to say the least. Nash believes that there were fans who thought seeing somebody beat Goldberg would have been a huge deal, but noted the harsh finality of actually seeing it happen, saying, when he got beat, they went, "Oh, I'm not sure I wanted to see that." Nonetheless, there was an obvious buzz created by the Shock title change. The following night, Nitro managed a 4.6 rating to Raw's 4.9, the narrowest gap since the October 26th head-to-head that Nitro won. Overall, Starrcade 1998 was negatively received by fans. An uninspired undercard, save for two stellar cruiserweight title matches, led to a main event decision many termed short-sighted. There would, however, be a chance to rectify matters in 8 nights' time. The January 4th, 1999 episode of Nitro would emanate from the same Georgia Dome in Atlanta where Goldberg steamrolled Hogan in July to capture his first world title. With more than 38,000 fans on hand in Goldberg's backyard, he could defeat Nash to right the Starrcade injustice. The blemish on his win-loss record would remain, but at least he could win the title back in Atlanta once more. In fact, the December 28th Nitro set the rematch up, as Nash cut a promo saying that he lamented getting the belt in this fashion, disavowing Hall's crucial interference. Thus, he offered to face Goldberg in Atlanta for the title next week. That same week, WWF Raw is War would air an episode taped 6 nights earlier in Worcester, Massachusetts. A live Nitro with a major title bout going head-to-head with a warmed-over Raw seemed like a chance for WCW to kick off 1999 with a Monday night ratings victory. Unless something big were to happen at those Raw tapings that, would be must-see TV for any fan. Sure enough, on that Tuesday night, the WWF commissioned a genuine feel-good moment. Mick Foley, beloved crowd favorite that greatly sacrificed his health and anatomy over the previous decade and a half, finally won the big one. In his role as Mankind, Foley defeated the hated Rock in a brief but action-packed Raw main event, scoring the pin after an assist from Stone Cold Steve Austin. Few wrestlers at this point deserved to be a world champion more than Foley for all he had given the fans through the years. And the WWF knew this, which is why they took the uncharacteristic step of actually announcing Mankind's title win on their website the day after it was filmed. They wanted to get the word out to even the non-spoiler crowd that if they turned into Raw on January 4th, they were going to witness something special. And so, the battle lines were drawn. Raw was promising the footage of the unlikely completion of underdog Mick Foley's long, arduous journey to pro wrestling's apex. Nitro was advertising Nash Goldberg 2 in front of a rabid crowd of over 35,000 fans on the heels of their controversial first bout. Both shows did find huge audiences, but what those audiences got was starkly different from one another. While many of those who opted into watching Raw knew how the show would play out due to spoiler availability, those that picked Nitro got a mystery meal of sorts, and most didn't find the main course to be all that palatable. After a fairly pedestrian first hour to the card, complete with a jubilant yet pointless promo from Ric Flair, the new kayfabe showrunner after defeating Bischoff the prior week, an angle commenced that, in hindsight, really feels like an iceberg tip first appearing over the horizon. At the Georgia Dome, police officers tracked down Goldberg, informing him that they had a warrant for his arrest. Strangely, they never read the charge to him, and he just went off with them. This angle took place right as Raw went on the air, so if you were watching Nitro to see the big title match, half the main event's going downtown to answer a few questions. The viewer eventually learned that Goldberg was being charged with aggressive stalking of Miss Elizabeth, which was originally supposed to be a much more dire charge, but Goldberg shot it down. The interrogations of both Goldberg and Elizabeth continued through several mind-numbing segments. Meanwhile, Nash accuses the erstwhile retired Hogan of being behind the conspiracy to get Goldberg hauled away, so he wants to wrestle him tonight to somehow make things right. Hogan, retired remember, agrees to the match, eschewing the opportunity to name his presidential running mate that night to instead challenge for the title one last time. And everybody thought the Shane McMahon lockbox storyline was messy and convoluted. So not only is Nitro's advertised main event in serious jeopardy of not actually happening by creative choice and not circumstances beyond their control, but what happened after the Hogan promo was something that entered the pro wrestling annals as one of the most asinine statements ever uttered, and it helped sully the reputation of a veteran announcer. See, at one time, Bischoff, as an announcer, would take the liberty of revealing the results of taped Raws on the other channel, to mock both the WWF's offerings and to play up the fact that Nitro was live, whereas Raw was pre-recorded tripe. And though that practice hadn't been done in a while, WCW was unearthing it for this historic night, but it wouldn't be Bischoff taking the dig at Raw. It would be current lead announcer Tony Schiavone. After Hogan's promo in which he accepted Nash's challenge, the WCW cameras panned the crowd as Schiavone said, verbatim, "If you're even thinking about changing the channel to our competition fans, do not, because we understand that Mick Foley, who wrestled here at one time as Cactus Jack, is gonna win their world title. Oh, that's gonna put some butts in the seats," before concluding with a dismissive huff. For one thing, Foley was almost universally respected in the world of wrestling, by peers and fans alike. For Schiavone to make Foley and his impending triumph sound like a joke wouldn't sit well with many viewers. In fact, Foley himself was upset when he found out what Schiavone said, and even phoned his old colleague to discuss it. Regretful over his remarks, Schiavone revealed to Foley that he was under orders from Bischoff to say what he said. But while Foley was upset at Schiavone, others in the WWF probably wanted to thank him. The insult backfired in spectacular fashion, as an estimated 500,000 to 600,000 fans switched over to Raw at almost that instant, wanting to witness Foley's big win. At one point, in the near immediate aftermath of the butts in seats remark, Raw took a commanding 6.2 to 4.1 lead in the nightly ratings. In fact, Raw defeated Nitro in all 8 quarter hours they faced each other in. However, Nitro did gain one victory in the ratings: the overrun. But before we get there, let's quickly explain how the Goldberg stalking angle resolved. As it turned out, Elizabeth changed her story several times in the interrogation, because the accusation was merely a ruse to get Goldberg pulled from the title bout. After she admitted to lying, Goldberg was free to return to the arena, where he could still face Nash if he made it back in time. In some exquisite unintentional comedy, the police station was actually across the street from the Georgia Dome. However, the revelation of Liz's lie came roughly a half hour before the main event slot. Thus, the race against time that Goldberg was now faced with was nullified by the actual proximity of the two buildings. As R.D. Reynolds and Brian Alvarez quipped in the death of WCW, Goldberg was somehow unable to get back in time, even though he had 30 minutes to walk several dozen feet. Maybe the crosswalk light was broken. So yes, because Goldberg was theoretically at the mercy of a stubborn crossing guard or something, Hogan replaced him in the match with Nash. The two took their places in the ring as Foley's pre-recorded victory lap aired on the other channel. The bell sounded to begin the match, and the two heavyweights circled each other, exchanging trash talk. Then, after less than a minute and a half of elapsed time, without any prior contact, Hogan raised a solitary finger, poked Nash in the chest, and Nash fell back like he'd been shot. Hogan made the cover, scored the 3 counts, and the ruse was complete. Hogan, Nash, and others were in on a conspiracy to consolidate powers from both NWO factions, reforming with Hogan as lead dog once more. Goldberg made it to the ring post-farce, but was summarily beaten down by the New World Order. If giving away taped Raw results wasn't enough of a nostalgia trip for a creatively ailing WCW, the company was hoping to rejuvenate things by doing what worked in 1996, letting the NWO once more run roughshod over the company. Nash chalked up the reformed NWO to putting together a dangerous squad for Goldberg to have to run through, presumably to get to champion Hogan at the end. Whatever the intentions were, the Fingerpoke not only failed to restore WCW's diminishing mojo, but it actively angered many fans who had been swerved out of an announced match, with the replacement being a total joke. The Rock Mankind title bout did a 5.9 rating to a 4.6 for Hogan vs. Nash. However, once Foley got the belt and was in the midst of celebrating, many fans flipped back over to Nitro in order to see the Hogan-Nash finish. Nitro won the overrun period with a 6.5 rating to Raw's 5.1, but it was hardly a true victory. All fans who flipped between the shows saw one company reward its audience with a storybook ending, and the other ignorantly swerve their already burnt-out audience with one more monumental sham. On the night, Raw won 5.7 to Nitro's 5.0. Though many point back at this moment as the definitive death of World Championship Wrestling, Nitro's ratings didn't immediately sink following the so-termed Fingerpoke of Doom. Raw won the next few weeks by margins of under a full ratings point, but by mid-February, however, the gaps began widening further. The night after St. Valentine's Day Massacre, Raw slaughtered Nitro 5.9 to 3.9. More victories of 2-point differentials followed in March, leading to Raw decimating Nitro the night after WrestleMania 15 by 3 whole points, 6.5 to 3.5. In most weeks going forward after that, Raw won by at least 2 points, if not 3 or more. By June, it wasn't uncommon for Raw to double Nitro's rating on a given week. As far as the reformed NWO goes, they were pretty much a dead issue by March. Hogan veered into a feud with Flair, while Goldberg got sidetracked with Scott Hall and other opponents that didn't look like Hogan, as well as missing some time due to injury. Creatively, ending this streak meant zilch long term, except that it kinda killed off one of the last original attractions WCW had. Nash uses the finger poke to demonstrate how it was most certainly not his idea, pointing out that if he'd booked himself to slay Goldberg, why would he just submissively hand the belt over to Hogan and play second banana once more? Goldberg's streak ending, the butts in seats comment, and the finger poke were all bad optics for a WCW trying desperately to stay competitive while the WWF surged ahead. It's not fair to say that all of the above killed WCW, though they did further harm the already fraying image of the company. And 1999 wouldn't get any better for WCW, as they lost valuable talents, cycled through head honchos, and continued to lose their grip on a once loyal audience. A year earlier, WCW came into 1998 holding almost all the cards, sitting far ahead of the WWF in star power, metrics, and perception. Things started turning for the worst long before Nash took the contrived dive inside the Georgia Dome, but the moment certainly didn't help matters. The night of January 4th, 1999 was a tale of two shows. Both of them promised a major happening in their main events, and each of them delivered just that, to wildly different receptions. It takes a lot of work to build a thriving wrestling empire with a satisfied fan base, and it doesn't take much exertion to burst the bubble. Sometimes, all it takes is the raising of a single finger.